The city was alive with its usual evening rhythm, horns blaring in the distance, hurried footsteps tapping against sidewalks, neon signs flickering above crowded shops, and the faint aroma of roasted coffee drifting from the corner cafe. It was a place where dreams thrived for some, but where survival itself was a battle for many others. Amidst the bustle of life, the divide between wealth and poverty was sharp, almost cruel. On one particular evening, as the chill of approaching winter bit into the night air, a young girl named Lena sat quietly on the stone steps outside a luxurious restaurant. She hugged her knees tightly to her chest, her thin frame trembling under the weight of both the cold and hunger gnawing at her belly. Her clothes, oversized and tattered, seemed to belong to another life, a life before the streets had claimed her. Her shoes were worn to the point of breaking, the soles barely holding together, and her small fingers were red and raw from exposure to the icy air. The restaurant behind her was a palace of warmth and indulgence. Through its glass doors, one could see elegantly dressed patrons dining beneath golden chandeliers. Laughter, the clinking of wine glasses, and the sizzle of freshly cooked meals created an atmosphere of celebration. Plates of steaming pasta, tender steaks, and decadent desserts were carried past Lena's weary eyes by waiters dressed in crisp uniforms. The contrast was heartbreaking. Inside was excess. Outside was desperation. Lena had been sitting there for hours, too timid to approach anyone. Several diners had walked out, brushing past her without a glance, their conversations more important than the child sitting in the cold. She had learned, over the years of being on the street, that people rarely saw her. To them, she was invisible, just another shadow among many. But hunger has a way of stripping away fear, and tonight her hunger was unbearable. As she shifted on the stone step, trying to keep her body warm, the doors to the restaurant swung open. A tall man in an immaculate black coat stepped out, adjusting his cufflinks with a precision that spoke of discipline and habit. His shoes shone like polished mirrors, and the faint scent of expensive cologne trailed after him. His presence commanded attention. People naturally gave way for him on the sidewalk. His name was Alexander Carter, a millionaire businessman whose empire of hotels and investment ventures made headlines often. To Lena, however, he was not a millionaire. He was simply a man holding a bag of leftovers. Her eyes followed the bag in his hand as though it were treasure. The aroma wafted toward her. Roasted chicken, buttery bread, something warm, something real. Her throat tightened, her lips trembled, and before she could stop herself, she whispered words she had rehearsed in her heart countless times but rarely dared to voice. "Sir, can I eat your leftovers?" Her voice was barely audible, cracked and weak from exhaustion, but in the stillness of that moment, it reached Carter's ears. He froze. The request was so unexpected, so raw, that it cut through the routine of his evening like a knife. He turned slowly, his eyes falling upon the frail figure of Lena. Their gazes met. Hers was filled with fear, shame, and desperation. His was one of surprise, then confusion, and slowly something deeper, an ache he couldn't quite explain. Carter had walked past beggars before. In his world, where business meetings and profits filled his days, he had learned to steel himself against such sights. "If you gave to one, you'd have to give to all," he once reasoned. But there was something about Lena's voice, its trembling sincerity, its fragile honesty, that rooted him to the ground. For Lena, those seconds of silence felt like eternity. She had expected what she always received: a dismissive glance, an angry word, or a cold indifference. Her body braced for rejection, her stomach knotted in dread. But instead of ignoring her, Carter did something she never expected. He stopped walking. He looked at her, really looked, not as the world did, with quick glances and judgments, but with the eyes of someone who recognized pain. He saw her thin arms wrapped around her knees, the stains of dirt on her face, the way her lips quivered not just from the cold but from holding back tears. She was not a nuisance, not an inconvenience. She was a child, hungry, alone, and in need. The world around them continued rushing by, cars honking, strangers moving, conversations filling the air. But in that instant, it felt as if time had slowed, leaving only Carter and Lena in that frozen bubble of silence. "Your leftovers?" he finally asked, his voice low, almost uncertain. Lena nodded quickly, her eyes darting toward the bag in his hand. She could already imagine the taste of the food, even if it was cold. Even scraps meant hope. Carter's grip on the bag tightened. A battle raged within him. Part of him wanted to hand the bag over, let her have it, and walk away. It would be simple, quick, and something his conscience could easily justify. But another part of him, the part stirred by the raw plea in her voice, felt that doing so would not be enough. This was not about food. It was about dignity. For Carter, that single question, "Can I eat your leftovers?" was more than a request. It was a mirror, reflecting something uncomfortable about himself and about society. Here he was, a man who had just enjoyed a meal that cost more than what many earned in a week, being asked by a child for scraps. And the worst part? She asked with humility, as though she didn't deserve better. He crouched down, lowering himself to her level. His expensive coat brushed the cold pavement, but he didn't care. He wanted her to see his face, not the towering silhouette of a stranger. "What's your name?" he asked gently. Lena hesitated. No one ever asked her name anymore. On the streets, she was just hey or you. To give her name felt like giving a piece of her identity, a reminder that she was still human. "Lena," she whispered. Carter nodded. "Lena," he repeated softly, as though committing it to memory. His eyes lingered on hers, seeing both the fragility and strength within them. Then he glanced at the bag again, at the food that had been carelessly packed away as an afterthought. Suddenly, it felt wrong to hand it to her. She deserved more than what was left behind. Instead of offering the bag, he stood and extended his hand. "Come inside with me. Let's get you something warm to eat. Not leftovers, your own meal." Lena's eyes widened in disbelief. She stared at his hand, unsure if this was a cruel joke. The thought of stepping into the restaurant terrified her. Wouldn't the staff throw her out? Wouldn't people sneer? Her lips parted to protest, but the kindness in his eyes anchored her. Slowly, cautiously, she placed her trembling hand in his. In that single gesture, something shifted. Lena, for the first time in months, felt seen. Carter, for the first time in years, felt the stirrings of compassion that success had buried under layers of ambition. Together, they walked toward the restaurant doors. The world outside continued its indifferent rhythm, but inside both their hearts, a quiet transformation had begun. It all started with a simple question, a question that cut through indifference, a question that would change both their lives forever. When Carter uttered the words, "Come inside with me. Let's get you something warm to eat. Not leftovers, your own meal," Lena thought she had misheard him. Her eyes widened in shock, darting between his face and the glowing restaurant doors behind him. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The idea of walking into that shining world, of sitting at a table like a guest, seemed impossible. Like a cruel joke her starving mind had conjured up. She shook her head quickly, stepping back. "No, no, I can't," she whispered, her voice quivering. They'll chase me away." Carter crouched down again, lowering himself so their eyes met. His coat brushed the dirty pavement, but he didn't care. His gaze was steady, calm, almost commanding. "Lena," he said softly but firmly, "you're with me. No one will chase you away. Not tonight." Her stomach twisted with hunger and fear. For a long moment, she hesitated, staring at the hand he held out toward her. Then, with trembling fingers, she placed her small hand into his. The instant her hand rested in his, something shifted between them. She felt a surge of warmth, not just from his skin but from the weight of his words. She wasn't invisible anymore. Someone powerful, someone untouchable, had chosen to see her. Together, they walked through the heavy glass doors. Inside the restaurant, the warmth of the restaurant enveloped Lena like a wave. After hours sitting in the cold, the sudden rush of heat almost made her dizzy. The air was thick with the aroma of roasted garlic, grilled meats, and fresh herbs. Glittering chandeliers hung above, casting golden light across velvet curtains and marble floors. Every surface gleamed, polished to perfection. Lena's eyes darted everywhere, wide with wonder but also with fear. She clutched Carter's hand tighter, aware of the stares piercing her from every corner of the room. And indeed, all eyes were on them. A man in a tailored suit leading a thin, ragged child through the dining floor was not something one saw every day. Forks paused midair, conversations dipped into whispers, and eyebrows lifted in surprise. A woman in a sequined dress glanced at Lena with open disdain. A couple at another table leaned toward each other, whispering furiously behind raised hands. Lena's heart pounded. Shame rushed over her, hot and suffocating. She felt the weight of those stares pressing into her skin, branding her as an intruder. Her instinct screamed to run back into the night, where at least the shadows didn't judge her. A waiter in a crisp uniform approached quickly, his professional smile brittle. "Good evening again, Mr. Carter," he greeted smoothly, bowing slightly. His eyes flickered toward Lena, disapproval barely hidden. "Would you like us to prepare your leftovers for the young lady?" His tone was careful, respectful, but the message was clear. Take her food outside, don't seat her here. Carter's jaw tightened. He had heard such tones before, in boardrooms and banquets, in subtle words meant to exclude. He straightened, his voice calm but edged with authority.
"No.
"We'll be dining here together. Please prepare a table for two." The waiter blinked, his facade cracking for a split second. "Of course, sir," he muttered, bowing again. He motioned toward an empty table near the window, away from the center of the room. Lena tugged at Carter's sleeve as they followed. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Please, I don't belong here. Everyone's looking at me." Carter glanced down at her. His eyes, sharp in business, softened. He leaned closer and said quietly, "Let them look. You're not here as a beggar, Lena. You're here as my guest. And a guest belongs." The word guest wrapped around her like a blanket. She had forgotten what it felt like to be welcomed, to be wanted. At the table, the waiter pulled out a chair for Lena. She hesitated before sitting, perching on the edge as though afraid she might dirty the pristine white cloth draped over the table. Her hands remained folded in her lap, her shoulders hunched. Menus were placed in front of them. Lena stared at hers, wide-eyed. The glossy pages were filled with elegant names she couldn't read, dishes she didn't understand. She bit her lip, embarrassed. Carter noticed. With a small smile, he closed his own menu and slid hers gently away. "Don't worry about this," he said softly. "I'll order for us." Relief washed over her, though she remained tense. When the waiter returned, Carter spoke without hesitation. "Chicken soup to start. Roast chicken with vegetables for the young lady. I'll have the steak. Bring warm bread, and for dessert." He paused, glancing at Lena's nervous face. "Chocolate cake. She'll like that." The waiter nodded, scribbling quickly, though his eyes betrayed curiosity. The moment he left, silence fell between Carter and Lena. The buzz of the restaurant filled the space around them, but at their table, the air felt fragile. Lena shifted uncomfortably, unsure what to say or do. She traced her finger along the edge of the tablecloth, marveling at how smooth it felt beneath her skin. Finally, she whispered, "Why are you doing this?" Carter leaned back, studying her. "Because no one should have to beg for scraps," he replied simply. His voice carried no pity, only conviction. Her eyes flicked up, meeting his. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. No answer came. She wasn't used to kindness. The first bite. When the soup arrived, steaming and fragrant, Lena's breath caught. The golden broth shimmered in the light, and the scent made her stomach twist with longing. She stared at it, uncertain. Carter noticed her hesitation. "Go ahead," he encouraged gently. "It's for you." Her hands trembled as she lifted the spoon. The moment the warm liquid touched her lips, tears welled in her eyes. The heat spread through her, melting the cold that had gripped her bones for days. It wasn't just food, it was warmth, safety, care. Carter frowned softly. Why are you crying? She wiped her eyes quickly, ashamed. Because no one has ever done this for me. Not like this. Carter's chest tightened. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he let her eat, watching quietly as she savored each spoonful as if it were treasure. Course by course, her face changed. The stiffness in her shoulders eased. The fear in her eyes softened. She still ate cautiously, afraid of spilling or making a mistake. But with every bite, her hunger gave way to something she hadn't felt in years: gratitude. And Carter, in turn, felt something shift inside him. This wasn't charity, it was justice. He wasn't simply feeding a child. He was restoring her dignity. The dessert. When the dessert finally arrived, a slice of chocolate cake, rich and layered, Lena gasped softly. She stared at it as though it were magic. Tentatively, she picked up the fork and took the smallest bite. The sweetness exploded on her tongue, and before she could stop herself, a smile spread across her face. It was a small smile, shy and uncertain, but it lit up her entire being. Carter felt something stir in him he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't pride, nor the satisfaction of a good deed. It was something deeper, more human. He had built an empire, but in that moment, watching a homeless girl smile over a slice of cake, he felt richer than he ever had. "Do you like it?" he asked. Lena nodded quickly, her mouth full, her eyes sparkling. She swallowed and whispered, "It's the best thing I've ever tasted." The promise. When the plates were cleared, Lena sat back in her chair, full for the first time in months. She looked different now, still fragile, still small, but not invisible. For the first time, she felt seen, valued, human. Carter leaned forward, his tone thoughtful. "Lena," he said quietly, "tonight is just the beginning. You're not going back to the streets after this meal. Not while I'm here." Her fork slipped against the plate. She froze, staring at him, eyes wide. "What? But why would you?" He met her gaze steadily. "Because I can. And because I should." The words sank into her like seeds of hope, fragile yet powerful. She didn't fully believe him, not yet, but something inside her dared to dream. For Carter, too, something had changed. He realized this night wasn't about feeding a child. It was about remembering his own humanity. And so, what began as a question about leftovers became the start of a promise. One that would transform both their lives forever. The last crumbs of chocolate cake still lingered on Lena's plate, and for the first time in months, she leaned back with the quiet contentment of someone who wasn't hungry anymore. But her eyes didn't just hold relief, they held uncertainty. Why was this man helping her? What did he want in return? On the streets, nothing came free. Carter noticed her hesitation. He had spent a lifetime reading boardrooms, investors, and rivals. It wasn't hard to read the guarded way Lena now avoided his eyes. She had eaten, yes, but her heart still braced for disappointment. He didn't want her to leave the table carrying only a full stomach. He wanted her to leave with dignity. He folded his hands on the table. "Lena," he began gently, "tell me about yourself." Her spoon clattered against the plate. No one asked her that. People asked her to move away, to stop begging, to get off the sidewalk. But never about her. She stared at him, confused. "Why?" she whispered. "Because I want to know you," Carter said simply. Lena hesitated. Part of her wanted to stay silent, to protect herself. Words could be dangerous, too much honesty could push people away. But there was something steady in his gaze, something that told her he wasn't asking to judge. He was asking to understand. Slowly, she began. Lena's story. "My mom and dad." Her voice caught, fragile. "They died.
Car accident.
I was 7. She paused, biting her lip hard, as if the act of speaking might unravel her. Carter leaned forward slightly, listening intently. He didn't interrupt. "I lived with my grandma for a while," Lena continued, her fingers nervously twisting in her lap. "She tried. She really tried. But she got sick. And then," her throat tightened. "She was gone too." Her small shoulders shook, but she pushed on. "After that, There was no one. I went to a shelter for a bit, but it was full. I didn't want to be split into foster homes. So I ran. Been on the streets since. Her words painted a picture darker than any street corner. Each sentence was short, clipped, as though too much detail would break her. But behind every word was a weight Carter could feel in his chest. "You're how old now?" he asked softly. 12, she murmured. 12. Just 12. Carter inhaled slowly, his chest tightening with a pain he hadn't expected. A 12-year-old should be worrying about homework, about which book to read next, not where to sleep at night. "And you've been surviving alone?" She nodded. "Sometimes I share with other kids. We know where to find food. The dumpsters behind restaurants, the bins where people throw bread. Some nights it's enough. Some nights it's not." Her eyes flickered up at him, cautious. "That's why I asked for your leftovers. I didn't want to steal. I just wanted what you didn't need." Carter clenched his jaw. The simplicity of her request cut into him. She hadn't asked for money, nor pity, only scraps. Scraps she had convinced herself were all she deserved. Carter's reflection. For a long moment Carter was silent. Memories stirred, ones he had buried beneath decades of wealth and success. He remembered being a boy in a tiny, crumbling apartment. He remembered watching his mother water down soup so it would last another night. He remembered the sting of going to school in shoes with holes, the humiliation of being laughed at when he couldn't pay for lunch. No one had helped him back then. He had clawed his way out, using his mind, his hunger, his determination. But in doing so, he had sealed off that chapter, convinced it was weakness to remember it. Now, sitting across from Lena, those memories came rushing back. Not as shame, but as recognition. "You know," he said slowly, his voice quieter than before, "I wasn't always rich." Lena blinked, startled. "You weren't." He shook his head. "I grew up poor. Maybe not on the streets like you, but close enough. My mother raised me alone. We barely got by. There were nights I went to bed hungry. Nights I wished someone would notice. But no one did. Not once." Lena tilted her head, studying him. For the first time, she saw not just a man in a suit, but someone who understood. "So, how did you become this?" She gestured vaguely at his expensive coat, his polished shoes. Carter allowed a small smile. "I studied, worked hard, fought for every opportunity. I promised myself I'd never go hungry again. But," he exhaled, glancing around the golden restaurant, "somewhere along the way, I forgot what hunger felt like, until tonight." Their eyes met across the table, two worlds colliding, yet somehow mirroring each other. A bridge between worlds. For a while, they simply sat in silence, the candlelight flickering between them. Outside, the city roared with its usual chaos, but inside, the restaurant faded into the background. Carter broke the silence. "Lena, you remind me of myself at your age. Scared, alone, wondering if anyone cared. The truth is, I should have remembered sooner. But I see you now." Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe him. Part of her did. But another part whispered that kindness never lasted. "People, they always leave," she murmured almost to herself. Carter's gaze sharpened. "Then maybe it's time someone stayed." The words hung in the air, heavy with promise. "Trust." Lena leaned forward, her small hands gripping the edge of the table. "But why me?" she whispered. "There are so many out there. Why stop for me?" Carter thought for a long moment. He could have said it was chance or guilt or duty, but none of those felt true. "Because you asked," he said finally. "You were brave enough to ask. And because when I looked at you, I saw myself, the me I'd almost forgotten." Lena's eyes shimmered. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as a burden, not as a beggar, but as a person. Her lips trembled. "I don't know if I can trust this," she admitted honestly. Carter leaned forward, his tone steady. "You don't have to trust me all at once. Trust is earned. Let me earn it." The connection. As the night deepened, their conversation grew easier. Carter asked about the books she liked to read at the library when she managed to sneak in. Lena admitted she loved stories, especially ones about heroes who came from nothing. Carter shared how he had once dreamed of becoming a writer before business consumed him. They laughed quietly over small things, her describing the funny habits of pigeons in the park, him telling her about the first time he failed spectacularly in a business deal. The weight between them eased, replaced with something fragile but real. Connection. By the time the last candle flickered low, Lena no longer sat hunched and fearful. She sat straighter, her eyes brighter, her spirit lighter. Carter saw it, and in her transformation he felt his own. The hardened businessman had softened, reminded of a truth he had buried long ago. Wealth meant nothing if it didn't lift others. The moment of realization. As they rose to leave, Lena glanced once more at the empty plates, the warm glow, the comfort she had thought was forever out of reach. She swallowed hard. "Thank you," she whispered. Carter paused, looking at her seriously. "Don't thank me yet, Lena. Tonight isn't the end. It's the beginning." She looked up at him, eyes wide, unsure whether to believe. But deep down, for the first time in years, hope flickered inside her. And in Carter's heart, the vow solidified. This wasn't about a meal. This was about a life. The night outside had grown sharper, the city streets glistening with rain as Carter and Lena stepped out of the restaurant. The warm glow of the chandeliers and polished silver cutlery faded into the background, replaced by neon lights, car horns, and the biting chill of midnight air. Lena pulled her tattered hoodie tighter around her thin frame, the sudden cold clawing at her skin. For Carter, his tailored coat shielded him from the wind, but the sight of Lena shivering beside him struck him harder than the temperature ever could. For the first time in years, Carter hesitated, not about business, not about money, but about something infinitely more complex. Another human being. He had the power to change her life, but the question remained, how? The dilemma. "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" he asked gently, keeping his pace slow so she wouldn't feel rushed. Lena shook her head, her eyes darting nervously to the ground. "There's a spot near the old train station," she admitted reluctantly. "Sometimes I sleep there, when it's not taken." The words stung Carter. When it's not taken. She was speaking about survival as though it were a competition, a cruel lottery of who got a corner of concrete to curl up on. He stopped walking, his breath clouding in the night air. "You can't go back there," he said firmly. Her head snapped up, alarmed. "Then where?" she demanded, her voice carrying the raw edge of someone too used to disappointment. "It's not like I can just walk into a hotel. People see me and they don't want me there." Carter saw the fight in her eyes, the way life had taught her to reject hope before it could betray her. He softened his tone. "You're coming with me." Lena froze. Her heart raced. With him? The offer sounded impossible, dangerous even. On the streets, kindness always had a price. "Why?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Because," Carter said, looking her straight in the eyes, "no child should be sleeping on the ground tonight, not while I'm still breathing." The ride. Minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The chauffeur stepped out, opening the door with mechanical precision. Lena stared at the vehicle as if it were a spaceship. She had watched cars like this glide past her on rainy nights, their tinted windows hiding worlds she could only imagine. Now one was waiting for her. I can't," she stammered, backing up slightly. "This is too much. I don't belong in there." Carter crouched slightly so his eyes met hers. "Lena, you belong wherever you're safe. That's all that matters right now. Trust me. Just for tonight." She hesitated, then swallowed hard and climbed in, clutching her threadbare backpack tightly against her chest as though it were a shield. Inside, the leather seats cradled her small frame, so soft and foreign that she barely dared to sit properly. She perched on the edge, afraid of dirtying them. The faint scent of cologne and polished wood filled the car, worlds away from the stench of alleyways she knew so well. Carter watched her silently, his heart tightening. He had seen billion-dollar deals close with less hesitation than it took her to simply sit down. Arrival. When the car finally pulled into the driveway of his home, Lena's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't a house, it was a mansion. Gleaming stone walls, wide staircases, tall glass windows glowing warmly against the night. She shook her head in disbelief. This can't be your house. It is, Carter said quietly. It looks like a castle, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Then tonight, it's your castle too. Her wide eyes flickered with fear again. I don't deserve this. Carter's voice was steady. Lena, you deserve to be safe. That's not luxury. It's a right. First steps inside. The front doors opened, and warmth spilled out like sunlight. Marble floors stretched across the entryway. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the scent of fresh flowers lingered in the air. Lena froze at the threshold, her dirty shoes pressing against the polished floor. I'll ruin it, she muttered. Carter shook his head. You can't ruin a home by walking into it. Come. Slowly, cautiously, she stepped inside. Her reflection gleamed faintly in the polished surfaces, and for the first time, she felt like a ghost wandering into another world. A housekeeper appeared at the top of the stairs, startled by the sight of Lena. She glanced at Carter questioningly, but he raised a hand. It's all right. She's with me. Lena's face flushed with shame, bracing for rejection. But to her surprise, the housekeeper gave a small nod and disappeared silently. The room. Carter led her down a hallway and opened the door to a guest room. Inside, soft golden lamps glowed against cream-colored walls. A thick bedspread lay across a queen-sized bed, fluffed pillows stacked neatly. Lena's eyes widened. This is bigger than the whole shelter. She stepped inside cautiously, then turned back to him. Is it really okay? Carter smiled gently. It's yours tonight, and tomorrow, as long as you need. She walked toward the bed, pressing her hand into the mattress as though testing whether it was real. The softness startled her. She had slept on cold stone, damp cardboard, rough benches, but never something like this. Her throat tightened. I can't take this, she whispered. You can, Carter said firmly. And you will. The bath. When Carter mentioned she could take a warm bath, Lena blinked in confusion. A bath? With hot water. Minutes later, steam filled the bathroom. Lena sank slowly into the tub, her thin frame trembling as warmth wrapped around her like an embrace she hadn't known she needed. The water loosened months of dirt, grime, and exhaustion. But more than that, it loosened the fear that had clung to her bones. For the first time in years, Lena felt human again. A meal at home. When she emerged, wearing clean clothes the housekeeper had found, Carter was waiting in the dining room. A simple plate of soup and bread sat on the table. It wasn't fancy, not like the restaurant meal earlier, but to Lena, it was more precious than gold. She ate slowly, savoring each spoonful, glancing at him every now and then as if to confirm this wasn't a dream. Carter didn't press her with questions. He simply sat with her, present. The vow. When she finished, Lena rubbed her eyes, exhaustion weighing down her small body. Carter led her back to the guest room, where the bed waited. As she crawled under the covers, she whispered, You'll still be here in the morning? Carter's chest ached at the question. For a child, mornings should be certain. For her, they were not. I'll be here, he promised. She nodded weakly, and within minutes, sleep claimed her. Deep, peaceful sleep, the kind she hadn't known in years. Carter stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her breathe steadily. His mind raced with the weight of responsibility. He had not planned this. His life was built on schedules, contracts, numbers. But Lena was not a number. She was a story, one that demanded to be rewritten. And in that quiet moment, he made a vow. He would not let her go back to the streets. Not tomorrow, not ever. The turning point. As the house grew silent and the rain pattered softly against the windows, Carter realized something profound. His life, filled with power and wealth, had been missing something essential. Tonight, a child had reminded him. This was no longer about leftovers. It was about legacy. For Lena, It was the first night in years that she slept without fear. For Carter, it was the first night in years he felt truly alive. And neither of their lives would ever be the same again. The morning sunlight streamed gently through the tall glass windows of Carter's mansion, golden rays spilling across marble floors and warm wooden beams. For most people, it was just another dawn, another predictable start to another day. But for Lena, it was the first sunrise in years where she didn't wake on cold concrete or to the sound of strangers shuffling past. Instead, she woke to the softness of clean sheets, the warmth of a thick blanket, and the faint scent of lavender that lingered in the guest room. She blinked at the ceiling, momentarily disoriented, her heart racing with fear that last night had been nothing but a dream. But when she turned her head and saw the neatly folded clothes on the dresser, the polished floor, and the morning light filtering through elegant curtains, reality sank in. For the first time in so long, Lena felt safe. Breakfast like no other. When she crept nervously out of her room, she half expected Carter to be gone, leaving her alone in a house too big to belong to her world. But there he was, sitting at the long dining table, reading a newspaper, a cup of coffee steaming by his hand. He looked up the moment he heard her footsteps. A small smile tugged at his lips. "Good morning, Lena." The words startled her. No one ever greeted her in the morning. No one ever noticed when she woke. Morning," she murmured, her voice cracking. A housekeeper appeared then, placing a plate in front of Lena. Fluffy scrambled eggs, toast, and a glass of orange juice. She stared at the food wide-eyed. This is all for me?" "Yes," Carter said gently. "All for you." Her hands trembled as she picked up the fork. She ate slowly at first, as though expecting someone to snatch the plate away, then faster, realizing no one would. Carter pretended to keep reading, but in truth he was watching her, his heart breaking and mending all at once. The first steps toward trust. After breakfast, Carter asked if she wanted to walk in the garden. Hesitant at first, Lena agreed, her small frame dwarfed by the endless expanse of manicured lawns, blooming flowers, and stone fountains. She trailed behind him, touching petals with cautious fingers. "I used to see gardens like this through fences," she said softly. "I thought they were just for other people." Carter slowed his steps, glancing at her. "They're for everyone, Lena. You don't have to watch from the outside anymore." Her throat tightened, but she said nothing. The words felt too good, too fragile, like glass she didn't dare hold. Schooling and a future. That afternoon, Carter made calls. He spoke to lawyers, social workers, and private schools. He wanted Lena's future secured, not just for the next few nights, but forever. When he told her about enrolling her in school, she froze. "School? Me?" "Yes," Carter said. "You're bright. You deserve an education." She shook her head violently. "I can't. I'm too behind. The kids will laugh. I'll fail." Carter crouched down so his eyes met hers. "Do you know what I see when I look at you? Someone who survived more than most adults ever could. If you can survive the streets, Lena, you can survive anything, including school." She stared at him, her lip trembling. "What if I can't?" "Then I'll be right there to help you," he promised. That night, for the first time, Lena allowed herself to believe him, facing the past. Of course, new beginnings didn't erase old wounds. There were nights when Lena woke screaming from nightmares, echoes of hunger, cold, and fear. Carter would rush into her room, sitting by her bedside until her breathing steadied. One night, she asked him through tears, "Why me? Why did you help me when everyone else just walked past?" Carter paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because once, a long time ago, I was the one who walked past. I saw people hurting, and I told myself it wasn't my problem. I had money, success, everything people dream of. But I didn't have meaning. Last night, when you asked for my leftovers, you gave me something I didn't even know I'd lost. A chance to be human again." Lena stared at him, the words sinking deep into her heart. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just a burden to him. She had given him something, too. Transformation. Weeks turned into months. Lena slowly adjusted to her new life. She started school where at first she felt out of place, her clothes too neat, her background too different. But Carter encouraged her daily, and little by little, she began to excel. Teachers were amazed at her sharp memory, her curiosity, her relentless will to learn. She soaked up knowledge as if making up for all the years stolen from her. At home, Carter found himself laughing more, smiling more. His mansion, once a cold fortress of wealth, now echoed with the sound of Lena's laughter, her footsteps racing down hallways, her questions at dinner that challenged him in ways no board meeting ever had. She even began helping the staff, asking them to teach her how to cook, clean, and plant flowers in the garden. She wanted to give back, to show she was not just a guest, but family. The bond. One evening, months after that fateful night, Lena and Carter sat on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Do you ever think about the first time we met?" Carter asked softly. Lena nodded, her eyes distant. "Every day. I thought you'd say no. Everyone else always did." "But I didn't," Carter said. She turned to him, her small face glowing in the fading light. "You didn't. You changed everything." Carter's throat tightened. "So did you, Lena." She tilted her head, puzzled. "Me? Yes. You reminded me of something I had forgotten. That all the money in the world means nothing if we don't use it to make someone else's life better." For a long moment, they sat in silence, watching the horizon. And in that silence, a bond deeper than words solidified. A bond not of blood, but of choice, trust, and love. The new beginning. Years later, Lena would look back on that night outside the restaurant as the turning point of her life. The night she dared to ask for scraps and was instead given a future. But in this moment, sitting beside Carter, she felt only gratitude. Gratitude for safety, for warmth, for love, and for the man who saw not just a homeless girl, but a human being worthy of a chance. Carter, too, knew his life had been rewritten. Once defined by numbers and deals, it was now measured in laughter, shared meals, and the sight of Lena walking proudly into her future. The new beginning wasn't just hers. It was his too. And together, they proved that sometimes the smallest question, "Can I eat your leftovers?" could spark the most extraordinary answer, a second chance at life.